We think of money as just paper or coins. But really, what is it? At its core, it's a system of trust. It's a promise that this thing in your hand actually has value. But what happens when that promise gets shattered? When money itself gets turned into a weapon? Well, let's get into it, because during World War II in Burma, that's exactly what happened.
So, picture this. It's May 1945. The place is Rangoon, the capital of Burma. The British have just come back, forcing the occupying Japanese army out. But instead of celebrations, the city is gripped by absolute panic. A reporter for the Times newspaper, a guy named Ian Morrison, he summed up the scene with just two words: currency chaos. The entire economy was, for all intents and purposes, broken.
And this number? This number is why. Can you imagine waking up one morning to find that your entire life savings are basically worthless? Well, overnight, a new exchange rate was set. 300 Japanese issued rupees, the money everyone had been forced to use for 3 long years, was now worth just one single British Indian rupee. Just like that, fortunes, big and small, just vanished into thin air.
But that begs a huge question, right? Why? Why on earth would the returning government make a choice that seems so completely destructive, so cruel even? To get that, we need to rewind the clock 3 years, to the beginning of a hidden war that wasn't fought with guns, but with banknotes.
The whole story really kicks off 3 years earlier, back in 1942, with one of the most unbelievable acts of the entire war. You had the British, in full retreat, making the decision to start burning their own money.
Yeah, as the Japanese army swept through Burma, the British rolled out this shocking policy they called denial of currency. The goal was pretty straightforward: stop millions and millions of rupees sitting in treasuries and banks all over the country from falling into enemy hands. And if they couldn't carry it out, they were going to destroy it.
The man in charge of all this, Arthur Potter, he actually left behind this incredibly vivid description of how they did it. He talks about his staff out in the Treasury courtyard frantically building these little furnaces out of brand new bundled banknotes and just setting them on fire. He said the whole courtyard was glowing with these little bonfires of cash burning all through the night.
And the final official number? It's just staggering. Almost 49 million rupees in notes and coins were officially listed as destroyed or kept from the enemy. And it wasn't just burning. They were dumping sacks of silver coins down wells and into deep parts of rivers. The British were literally burning and burying their own treasure to keep it away from the Japanese.
So, with all the British currency either destroyed or hidden away, the Japanese occupation had a problem. They needed a new way to make the economy run. Their solution? They just introduced a whole new kind of money.
And this is really where the main conflict starts, because these two currencies were polar opposites. The British rupee, on the one hand, was a promise. It was backed by sterling, it had serial numbers, you could track it, it was a real asset. The Japanese rupee, on the other hand, it was what's called military scrip. Basically, it's just IOUs printed by an army. It had no backing, no serial numbers, and definitely no promise of payment. It wasn't an asset, it was a tool of control. Now, this occupation currency got a nickname across Southeast Asia: banana money. That's because the version used in Malaya had banana plants on it. Simple enough. In Burma, though, the Japanese tried to be clever and put local pagodas on the notes to make them more acceptable. Oh boy, did that backfire. For the very Buddhist Burmese population, especially for women who would tuck money into their skirts, using sacred images on money was seen as deeply offensive. And the result of flooding the country with this worthless paper money was immediate, and it was devastating. If you went to the markets in Rangoon, the price of cooking oil shot up by 10 times. Local cigars, 30 or 40 times more expensive. The Japanese just kept printing more and more money to pay for their expenses, which kicked off insane hyperinflation. The sheer scale of this it's just hard to wrap your head around. Before the war, Burma had about 200 million rupees circulating. By the time the British retreated, that had already jumped up. But by 1945, the Japanese had pushed the total to over 3.5 billion. The money supply grew by more than 17 times.
Okay, so all of this leads us to the climax of our story. By 1945, the British are about to retake Burma, and they have a huge decision to make. And that decision falls right back on the shoulders of the same man we met earlier, Arthur Potter, who was now a brigadier. The question was really simple, but the answer was going to impact millions and millions of lives.
What do you do with all this worthless banana money that is now the only currency that regular people actually have?
So they were really stuck between a rock and a hard place. Option A, redeem the Japanese money, give it some value. Politically, this was the smart move. It would avoid mass suffering, earn some goodwill, but it would also basically legitimize everything Japan had done economically during the war. Then there was option B, demonetize it, just declare it worthless. That would kill hyperinflation in its tracks and totally discarded Japan. But the cost? The financial ruin of countless innocent people.
They chose option B. The very hard decision was made to give absolutely no official value to the Japanese currency. And it was this exact policy that led directly to the currency chaos and that crazy 300-to-1 black market rate that we saw at the very beginning.
The military part of the war was over, but this economic war, it left a deep and very long-lasting scar on the country's relationship with the whole idea of money. And the chaos didn't stop there. For years afterwards, the courts were jammed with people arguing over wartime debts. The government's solution was, well, it was fascinating. They retroactively assigned a value to the Japanese rupee, but only to settle these private arguments. So a debt of 100 Japanese rupees from 1942 was declared to be worth 100 British rupees. But as the war went on and inflation just exploded, that value plummeted. By 1945, it was worth just 5 rupees. But the real trauma of 1945 created a dangerous pattern. The idea that a government could just snap its fingers and make money worthless was now thinkable. And in the decades that followed, military governments in Burma did it again and again and again. Each time, just wiping out people's savings and hammering home this deep, deep distrust of paper money. People went back to saving the old-fashioned way, gold and jewelry.
Ultimately, the story of Burma's money war really shows us that currency is so much more than a way to buy things. It's a social contract. And it leaves all of us with a really big question. Once that contract, that fundamental trust, is broken so badly, can it ever really be put back together again?